Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. This time we have another painting tutorial. Now, Dusk Till Dawn Studios were kind enough to send me a box of random goodies to paint up for the channel. This is the first video. So this is Druku, the Berserker Orc. This was done by Jason Rodriguez, and we've primed it with Grey Seer by Citadel. Now, we're not going to be doing this as a orc. I want to show you how you can use different sculpts for more than what they're intended for. So, the plan for this is we are going to turn it into a vampire. A just brutal, bloody vampire. So we need our trusty wet palette. This thing is a godsend. If you do want to get into painting sculpts, please get a wet palette. It has changed how I paint. It is very handy for sort of starting and stopping because it will keep your paints wet. It's phenomenal. If you make a nice little blend that you want to keep, it's so good to use. So we're going to get all our essentials ready, all our paints, we'll get our brushes ready. Now we're going to start with Phoenician Grey. That is going to be our base colour for the skin for Druku. Now we're going to get it onto our wet palette. It's a very watery paint, this one, so just bear that in mind if you do decide to go with this. Probably won't need to thin it as much as some other Citadel paints, for example, but it's a very nice colour. So we're going to get enough on here to cover the whole skin. Make sure you close your paints, you don't want any spillages. And we're just going to thin this down with just some water. Some people use Lamy medium, some people just put it on straight. I always prefer to do thin coats because then if you don't like the colour or whatever, you can always change it if you decide to. So just going to mix this down. I've always been told that you need to have this sort of looking like semi-skimmed milk. That's what people have always recommended that to have. So we're going to cover all of the skin in this lovely Phoenician Grey. So we'll start with the forehead, just because that is the biggest area and probably the easiest to do. Nice thin coat all over. And we're not going to worry about not getting on the teeth or not on the eyes or whatever. We're just going to cover the whole thing and work from there. The only thing I do want to be a little careful with, I don't want to get the hair. Just because I don't want to... Because there's a nice separation line in the sculpt, I don't want to have to jump backwards and forwards over that. Just because it's very hard to sort of re-blend that together. But yeah, we're just going to cover this. It's a very, you might be looking at it, it's very blue. Not a worry though, because we have got an idea. Now, I forgot to start the camera when I was in the middle of this, but we're using Kylos Black, and we're just going to cover all the hair. I love Kylos' colour range. They're very thin paints, so they go on very, very well. But the tone of this, as you can see here, it's very, very dark. So just bear that in mind. We're now going to go over with Mechanicus Standard Grey. Now, it might seem a little redundant putting this over a black base coat, but if you put this over an already grey or whatever, I find that it's very bright and colourful. And I want this vampire to sort of have a darkish, sort of grotty, grim-looking appearance. So his hair would need to be very dirty looking. So we're just going to put this all over. We're not going to worry about leaving any black shown. We're going to cover the whole thing. I just need a nice, dark, deep grey colour for it to sit on. I always find that sculpts like this are a little hard to paint because of the ridges in the hair. The paint doesn't always, stick to the inner parts. But when it comes to dry brushing, they're amazing. And I love Jason Rodriguez's sculpts, especially for Mythic Legions. They're so, so good. And Dusk Till Dawn I've used before, and they're amazing company as well. So this is how it looks now. You can see it's got this nice... It still looks very light, but it's a deeper grey, which is what I wanted. So now we're going to start detailing the hair. So these are the paints we're going to use. We've got White Scar, Phoenician Grey again, and Praxi White. So, if we start with our White Scar, we are going to mix this into our Phoenician Grey. Just to make a nice little... I want to layer the hair almost. And I've just realised this isn't Phoenician Grey, so this is the Mechanicus Standard Grey. My apologies. But we want to have this hair very layered. I don't want it to be just sort of like a normal coat, a nice wash, and some dry brushing. I want there to be lots of different colours, but the same colours, if that makes sense, to make it look like it's really dirty and grim. So we get this, we're going to put this over. Make sure you get all the paint off your brush. You want it nice and controlled. Now this is the dry brush I always use. If you've seen any of my videos, I love Army Painter's sort of rounded tip, very soft dry brushes. I think they're amazing. So as always, get the paint on your brush and we're going to just wipe it off onto our tissue, just like that. We want to work as much paint off of the bristles as possible, but also work the paint into the bristles. And then we're just going to do a light dry brush. Now with this, I'm going to do, the heavier you dry brush, the more you change the colour. So the lighter you do it, you just hit like the tips and whatnot. So each colour we add, we're going to do it lighter and lighter and lighter. So this is quite a heavy dry brush. As you can see, the colour changing quite drastically. The more whites we add, that sort of stuff, we'll be hitting it a lot lighter. And we're just covering everything. Okay, now it's time for Phoenician Grey. I got my colours right this time. So, we've also got Praxi White. So we're just going to get some of this on. And once again, we've wiped some off. And a lighter dry brush than we had. There we go. And we're not trying to hit every area. We want it to only be in certain areas. We don't want the whole thing to change. So you see, we're being a lot more controlled. We're a lot more selective with where we're dry brushing. We're not hitting all of it. And the good thing about this is the dry brush is so light, you can handle it without worrying too much. The only place we're being a bit heavier is on the hairline. Because the base colour is also Phoenician Grey of the skin, it'll make a nice little blend as we go through. And now we're just going to hit it with a nice little dry brush of Praxi White. Now, if you've seen any of my dry brushing videos before, sit-down dry paints are very, very thick, which is good, because it means they dry brush very, very well, but they are a thick, thick paint. And we're just going to hit all the top ridges. Just like this. Now, we're doing this here a little weirdly. Most people would do just a solid colour, and then they'd put a shade or a wash over the top. We've done our dry brushing first, and then we're going to put the shade over. Now, the reason for this is that I really, really, really want... As I said, I want it to be like dirty, grotty. So the plan is we're going to put this over, and then this shade will cover all the different highlights. So this shade itself will also appear different. As you can see here, some parts, even though it looks like it's pooling, it's not. It's reacting to different greys in that. This was something that, unfortunately, I can't remember their name, but someone in the Mythic Legion Cabal suggested to me to try at one point. And I love it. I think it's amazing. Because obviously shades react differently to whatever they put over the top of. So we're just going to cover the whole thing. And again, you don't want too much, you don't want it to pool, you just want it to have a nice shade. If there is any pooling, just move the paint around. Like such. There you go, see? Now the reason I'm using Agrax instead of like a black shade or a grey shade or whatever is because it's a very brown colour, which is amazing for dirt. I use Agrax for most things now. If I want like a dirty looking character, instead of using like Newland oil, which is like a black, almost like mechanical shade, is always Agrax. I think the brown shade is just amazing. I go through so much Agrax Earthshade now. so much of it. Now the only problem I find with Agrax is it does, depending on how much you use and how well you've shaken and whatnot, I do find it can leave the head a little sticky. To solve this, we're going to actually do a wash of grey as well. So we're using this Mechanica Standards. Now to make a wash, we are actually going to combine it with Lamy Medium. Again, this is something else I love. It's basically a clear paint, but it's amazing for making your own washes or thinning down washes. It's amazing if you use contrast paints for blending two different contrast paints together. So if you look here, we're just morphing this. It's very, very wet. You can just see how liquidy that is. So just going to work it in. Going to work some off the brush at some point. And you can see just how warrior it is, which is what we wanted. You can see my flesh tone coming through in areas. That's exactly what we're looking for. We don't want to cover up the brown from the agrax. We don't want to cover up the other greys. We just want to sort of have a seamless colour transition. So we're going to put this all over, and because of how wet it is going to look like the entire piece is changing. But I'm fairly confident that when it dries, it won't be as sharp and vibrant as it looks here. And we're just going to cover all of it, just make it nice and uniform. Unfortunately, it's very hard to paint with a camera in the way. At some point I will get a nicer setup, so... There we go, we've covered the whole area. And we're just going to dab off some of the excess liquid. As you can see, you can see how warrior is, the fact that that's what it's doing. But then this is how it looks. You can see, we can see the different greys. You've still got that brown coming through in areas. I'm very happy with how this looks. Very, very happy. The only thing we are now going to do is we are going to just do another light dry brush over the top. We're just going to reinforce some of those highlights. And you see, as it dries more and more, you can see those colours popping through. So we're going to go back to our Phoenician Grey. Work some off. I really like this colour. Very sort of Arctic looking. And we're just going to do a gentle dry brush. Again, we don't want to change the colour, we just want to make some details pop. And again, we're going to do this with the grey as well. The only place we're reinforcing is that hairline. As we said, we just want that seamless transition between the hair and the skin, considering they're the same colour. It'll just give it a bit more of a realistic look. So there you go, covering as much as we can. A lot with how I paint things, I will go back and forth across multiple things. I'll paint something inside, I don't quite like how it looks, or I don't like the highlight colour or whatnot. So then we will bounce back and forth, and that's okay. Some master painters will just be able to smash it and they'll nail it immediately. I'm definitely not one of those people. It takes me a lot of trial and effort. Here we go, we're just going to pick up those highlights again. Almost like the lights hitting the tip, especially on these pointed parts of the hair and any very raised up areas in the actual long flowing locks. And again, Citadel's dry brush paints are so easy to work with. And the colours are really nice as well. Okay, now this is how the hair looks now that it's dried. And I love how this looks. I'm very happy with this. I am very, very happy with how that has come out. So, we're moving on to deco art. Now, I love these paints. The colours are amazing. They are so thick though, so if you're going to use it, just be careful. But this sculpt just has a nose ring just here. It also has an earring on the left ear. So we're just going to pop this colour over. Now, because of how small and fiddly this is, I am going to do this off camera. But this is the result. Just gives it a nice colour pop, which is going to be amazing. Now, time for some Lamy Medium. As I said earlier, you can use Lamy Medium to make shades thinner, which is what we're going to do. Now, we've used Agrax in this painting tutorial, and we've used Lamy Medium. We are going to thin down some Agrax because I don't want such a strong shade. Now, we did have to move our Lamium up because it was starting to just pick up some of the grey from the bottom, so we found a more dry patch on our wet palette. But this is a much thinner version now of Agrax we've made, and as you see when we pull it over, it's not even going to look like it's covering that much. Compared to when we did the hair, you can see the difference in colour here. but it will make those details pop, but it'll also give that realistic appearance of like dirt and grime without completely overwriting the blue we have here. So yeah, we're just going to cover the whole skin. Again, we're not worried about missing the eyes, the teeth, whatnot. We are just going to cover as much as we can. We want to fill in all the detail so that when it dries, the amazing like sculpt work we have here will really, really shine and pop. And you can see it hardly looks like we're painting at all. It just looks like we're putting like water over the top. But when the brown dries, it will really, really shine. So let's leave it there to dry. Now we have these again, Phoenician Grey and White. Now this is going to be used to do our detailing work on the face. So we're going to use this to really just pop the ridges and the high points on the face, just to give the face some extra detail. This is something I never used to do. It took me a long time to muster up the courage to do this. So we're just going to get our base colour, the Phoenician, and we're going to just line it up a little bit with some white. And we're going to cover all the raised edges. So on this sculpt, the nose, for example, the cheekbones, there are some raised edges around the top of the eyebrows. We're just going to hit that, and it's just going to make where the natural light would hit, it's going to make those details pop. Now my advice would be to get a very sturdy brush, one that doesn't come apart too easy. I love the Monster Brush by Army Painter. That is what I use for this. It keeps its point, it's very rigid, and as you can see we can get some nice straight looking lines all across those high points. And while it's wet, it's going to look a little bit brighter, but when it dries, it's going to really make those details pop, but it's not going to look too out of place. So for example, you can see here, we're going to hit any high points. So you saw us just looking at the chin. We're going to hit the two little hard bits on the chin. We're going to hit these cheekbones here, because they're very, very detailed. They stick out very strongly on this sculpt. We're just going to hit any other raised points we can see, because when we have these highlighted, compared to the very thin shade we just put over, it's going to really, really make those details stand out, and it's so simple to do. Just takes a little bit of courage. Something I did not do for a long time, as I said, because I was so worried about messing up a sculpt, or I was so unsure about where highlights would be. But just hit those raised edges, just like this. And then eventually things will start to click, and you'll realize what parts you should highlight, what you shouldn't. Just like this. Hit that nose. One of the parts I'm always worried about doing. Just across there. And the more you do this, the more your hands will get steadier and steadier as well. That's something I used to have really shaky hands. So that's something that I fixed, which is very, very helpful. Now to really make these details pop, and we will be doing this ourselves, you can do a lighter shade of this again. So for example, we're going to put some white sculpt back into our Phoenician Grey, and then we'll go over the highest raised points, like the tip of the nose, like the cheekbones. Again, just to give it more depth. But again, it won't stand out too much when you're painting it. But when you look at the sculpt when it's dry, you'll really notice the difference. It will really make those details pop. And just take your time. That's the one thing I'd always recommend. Take your time when doing this. And just do what you feel feels right. So this is after our first layer, and you can see the nice detail. You can see the different shades of blue compared to the wash we put over, how the wash is now seeped into all those cracks and giving it a dirty appearance. It really makes this sculpt look angry. So as I said, get some more white skull and just pop it in here. And again, this is only going to be for the super, super high points. So the cheekbones, the nose, like I said. It's just going to add that level of realism of where different parts of light would hit the raised up bits and then dissipate throughout the sculpt. And again, don't worry about how fiddly it is. Just take your time. Hit that chin just to give the chin some depth. And there we go. That is how it's now looking. Okay, now it's time for eyes. The part I hate. So we're going to use a little drawing pin. These have been a godsend. This was again another recommendation from someone within the cabal. You do kind of have to like scratch the paint on. So be patient, it will take a very, very long time. But we want to try and... I want to make like a feral vampire. So we're just going to make the eyes yellow. And then we're going to put a nice wash over the top. Instead of using an actual wash though, we're going to use this contrast by Citadel. It's a very bright, vibrant orangey colour. And again, you can see how nervous I got while doing this. I hate doing eyes. Just hate it. I was mustering up the courage here. I'm just going to put it over the top like that. We're not too worried about hitting the blue around the edges because it'll just make it look like the eyes have like a nice glow to them if it's sort of appearing onto the eyelids and stuff. So don't worry too much. Small little mistakes like that can work. So then we're going to let that dry. We'll see how those eyes look. Hopefully they come out looking okay. In the meantime, we have some white scar. We're going to yellow down this... Sorry, we're going to brighten down this yellow. And this is going to be for the teeth. Now, bear with me because the mouth is going to look a little weird. So we put yellow all over the teeth, and it's a very bright yellow as you see. We're going to hit it with some agrax to just dirty up the yellow a little bit. Just whack it all over. You can see we're umming and ahhing. Again, the further you get into this, the more nervous I get, because we're so close to being finished, and one little mistake can set you back. But just put agrax all over. This is something that we did with our skeleton head we painted. We put yellow all over the teeth. Oh, sorry, we made the teeth yellow, we put agrax all over it to dirty them up. Now, the only thing you need to worry about is pooling, and pooling is so easy to fix. Just get your brush, dip it in the pooling, and the bristles will absorb any sort of big pools of the shade that I've developed there. Okay, so that's what it's looking like now. Now, it's time to do the lips, and lips are really hard to do. Not because they're hard to paint, just because I find it's hard to make a colour. So we're going to use these two paints. We've got Evil Sun's Scarlet, and we've got White Scar again. And now this is very pink. So bear with me, because this is like electric hot pink. But we're going to hit the lips, because I do have method to this madness. But like you can see here how bright the pink is. So we actually hit it with a shade, as I knock over my entire display, we put some Flesh Tearers red, and we put some Camber Crimson over the top, just to darken it up. Now, of course, it's a vampire. We need to be feral. We're going to hit with the blood. So this is Citadel Blood, the Blood God. It's a technical paint, and it's amazing. I love it. So, to do this, we're going to get our little dry brush again. We've got some red on there, and we're going to dab some off, because we don't want too much. Like, we don't want it to be really thick. And we also don't want it to be even and just like spread on, so we're going to dab it in all sorts of places, all around the mouth. Just like that, just like he's been feeding. Any parts you don't want, you can just wipe off. And we're going to hit it with this. And then we're going to let that dry. Now again, this sculpt was from Dusk Till Dawn students. They've been kind enough to send this to me. I will pop their link in the description if you want this sculpt or any others. They are amazing guys. If you enjoyed, please drop me a like. It helps me amazingly. If you're new and haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.